forget if I need, go live, of course, the big blue button there. Okay, and we are definitely live on LinkedIn, and we're definitely live on YouTube. Perfect. So apologies for the delay. Let me mute LinkedIn. I think that I've got it. There you go. It's my fault. I'm in Spain. Look at my hair. It's incredibly funny because I'm in the beach and it's incredibly hot here, and I'm about to die of dehydration, but I had to just come back to Spain for a week for personal reasons, and I've got a really weird setup here. So everything seems to be okay. You can all hear me well, right? Courtney and Zach? Okay, so we're live. Welcome everyone to the fourth edition of this SPDX ecosystem series. As you know, if you joined the previous ones with Kubernetes, I haven't uploaded the recordings. I need to have a critical mass of videos. Probably this one will make it enough. I'm not sure. Maybe the interview with Google, next one, will be actually the one that will allow me to have some critical mass of videos and then upload the actual playlist for you to enjoy. But yes, the whole point is to engage with the main companies out there, main projects out there, Kubernetes, GitHub in this case, VMware in the first case, in the first episode, Google, as I mentioned, others to come. Please reach out to me if your product or project incorporates any SPDX functionality, because I want to know, because the whole point is to let everyone know out there that the toolchain, the main toolchain providers like GitHub are incorporating SPDX, and I want to know how they came about that, how they did so, and how they offer that, so that the end users, the SPDX community and wider and broader, can use them themselves, right? Because I feel there's a huge awareness about SBOMs, but we need to make it concrete and see how each one of the vendors and projects out there implement it, the reasons why they do it, and how they offer it, right? So I'm just building awareness of the ecosystem out there. In this case, of the ecosystem of vendors and projects that provide SPDX functionality. There will be another series about raising awareness of the way we consume it, so from the demand side, if you wish, but that will come later on. So Zach, Courtney, where are you guys joining from? I'm joining from Spain, as I just said. I'm Jordi Mon. I'm the SPDX marketing responsible, and I've got two relevant stakeholders from GitHub that are joining from where? Introduce yourselves and let us know where you're joining from.
Hi, I'm Courtney Claessens. I'm a product manager at GitHub. I am joining from Central Ontario, about 90 minutes outside Toronto.
And I'm Zach Steindler. I'm an engineer at GitHub who works on supply chain security. And I'm a little bit outside of Detroit, Michigan in the United States.
Nice. So I'm fairly sure that everyone, literally everyone in the stream knows what GitHub is, but does anyone want to give a very concise overview description of what GitHub is? And then we'll move on to the specific area of GitHub that you guys are working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So GitHub is a complete end-to-end developer platform to build, scale, and deliver secure software. We're also the largest global software development platform. We have over 100 million developers working on GitHub, and we enable them to do that work with other developers from anywhere.
Nice. So, but you guys are focused on specific area. GitHub is, as you said, an end-to-end platform. By definition, that makes the product just humongous in terms of offering, in terms of the breadth that it covers. So you guys are focused on a specific area. Would you like to comment on that? Yeah, what is it, the specific area of the product that the features, capabilities, whatever, that you guys work on? And then we will move on to, what are you thinking of that what would good look like for that area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we are representing the security side of the house. So I work in the supply chain area. So here we're looking at software composition analysis side of things. We're focused on knowing your environment, managing your dependencies, fixing and publishing vulnerability information. So for folks that have heard of Dependabot, that sits within our supply chain side of things within security products.
It's too long.
It's a handful. And then so within that, we have, for knowing your dependencies, we have the dependency graph, which is, I just moved teams actually, but I was working on dependency graph, and I'll wear that hat for the duration of the hour, where we are trying to let you know all the different packages that are in use in your repository, both your direct and transitive dependencies. That marries then with Dependabot, who is looking at how do we know if these dependencies have any vulnerabilities, and letting you be aware of those, offering remediation workflows by automatically generating security update PRs. And that ultimately leverages our advisory database, which is a curated open source database of vulnerabilities in the open source world. And we're actually, we're the second largest CVE provider, which is it really just contributes to kind of like the whole entirety of the ecosystem, and marrying, the dependency information with the vulnerability information, so that people.
Well, I didn't know about that. I did know about Dependabot because I freaking love it. But wow, okay, fantastic. Well, that's a lot of ground to cover. What about you, Zach? Do you work in the same team as Courtney, or at least in the same features and capabilities?
Yeah, so one of the things that I love working in supply chain security is how broad it is, and how many opportunities there are to collaborate with different GitHub teams. I have collaborated closely with a lot of the supply chain security teams at GitHub that include things like dependency graph, Dependabot, advisory database, but also more recently we've been focused on open source supply chain security. So that's involved collaborations with the NPM team, which is part of the GitHub family, as well as collaborations with the Actions team, so that people can build open source code on Actions in a way that's transparent about the source code and the build instructions that produce that end result build artifact that then ends up on NPM.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I feel it's natural to an end-to-end platform like GitHub to be focused on supply chain, precisely because they match very well in the breadth of it. Like supply chain covers end to end, right? That's the whole definition, right? From source to packaged delivery good, right? In the real world, or packaged software in terms of software. And to be honest, I was at Vancouver, what was it, 2 months ago, Open Source Summit. If that measures the temperature of the software world in a way, which I think it does, probably in a limited way, but still representative, like supply chain security, and in general transparency. So knowing more about the origin of each one of the packages and dependencies that your software depends on was all the rage, right? Some people call that software supply. No, actually, there was someone made a difference. I can't remember who. I think it was Jeff Shapiro. No, David Wheeler, between open source and commercial software. So software supply chain would apply to commercial software, and dependency supply chain, I think he called it for some, but it was semantic. In any case, we all were interested in the transparency of all of it, and the security, and eventually making decisions about risk, security, and so forth when we've got a full visibility. So I guess, does your view, is the market telling you the same to you? Because you guys obviously draw from your client base, draw from the community, the huge, as Courtney said, it's the biggest hosting platform in the world. So among other things, so what are you seeing on the market? What are the demands, the requests in terms of software supply chain in general? What are the biggest trends that you're seeing in that?
Yeah, it's definitely becoming, like, knowing your dependencies is definitely becoming table stakes, and having that information, decisions on like how you manage your dependencies, how you update them. Are you in compliance with your organization's policies, whether you're working on open source projects or in an organization? And what we've been seeing, and this is obviously like particular to GitHub, but the ability to bring those like more security focused tasks closer to the developer, so that you're not having security teams come along afterward and be like, well, actually I need you to fix this, this, and this, and giving developers the information that they need at the right time so that they can resolve things then and there, or giving them mechanisms so that we're not getting in the way of their flow, but we're making them aware of the different any vulnerabilities or compliance things. And that's really the area that I was focused on. And then with GitHub, developers are living in them, so living in GitHub, working in GitHub every day, so it makes sense that that is a place like on the pull requests within their repos, within their issues, where that information can be surfaced. Zach, do you have a different or additional view there?
No, I love it. I think ease of use is key. We want to make developers' lives as easy as possible. And then maybe the only thing I'd add is just transparency. I think David Wheeler is right that it's a little different if you're talking about open source or enterprise, but the principles are the same. Everyone wants to know what's in their software, and SBOMs are a great way to provide that information.
I guess let's move on to SBOMs. Like, is there anything in particular that you see critical about SBOMs? Like, what drove the roadmap, in this case of GitHub, towards first, not even like incorporating the functionality per se, like what made SBOMs kind of critical, or at least relevant enough to be thought for in the consideration stages and then eventually incorporated into the product? What is it about SBOMs that matches well with, well, Dependabot maybe, dependency graph, whatever is already important to GitHub? What did SBOMs in general add to that?
Yeah, so in general, as I mentioned, being like, the larger software platform, we feel like we have a responsibility to our users that they trust GitHub to support the safe use of open source software. And, we can do that with like dependency graph and Dependabot advisory database and everything. And SBOMs kind of fits well within that existing software composition analysis suite that we had.
Yeah.
When I first learned about SBOMs, I was like, okay, so how is that different really from what we do in dependency graph, where we're like giving you an inventory of everything in there? So it's really just looking at that interchange format and making it available to kind of come out of the GitHub platform and being able to be used in different regulatory and compliance scenarios. And we want to, and so, we can't, would be lying if I would say, the executive order and compliance is just like, whatever, like it's really important, right?
It's happened to everyone, don't worry. Like, you can be completely honest. Like, we're all humans. GitHub is a human organization. We move with incentives. We sometimes need to be smacked in the bottom to react. And it's happened to me, to everyone. It happens to everyone. So, and by the way, I'm not saying that, you are saying it yourself, but I'm fairly sure it's not the only reason.
Sure. Oh, yeah, for sure. But I think that was like the start of that planting a seed in a lot of our customers too, for them asking, oh, I'm like perking up about SBOMs now. I need to learn what those are. I'm going to ask GitHub about it. They have an inventory of all my stuff, so maybe they can help me here. So we were starting to hear a lot of customer demand for SBOMs. And it was interesting to hear like the different, kind of like the spectrum of maturity from different folks with SBOMs. Some being like, I kind of know what this is. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? To folks that want signed and tested SBOMs on every build that are stored in this, like, so it's been an interesting time to talk to customers like through SBOMs for sure.
Yeah. I think that we're in the hype moment in which everyone's talking about it, but regarding the maturity, the familiarity of the general market and the mass population of the market, if you wish, that's low, still low. Loads of hype, real knowledge about it in general, except the incumbents that have, their hands in it, like you and other vendors and projects. I think that the majority of the people are very aware, have little knowledge about that. I don't know if you agree with that, Zach. About SBOMs, sorry.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to say because I'm so steeped in these conversations about supply chain security. But I will say there's a difference between being at the Open Source Summit in Vancouver and being on a call with customers. The customers have a lot on their plates, and depending on their priorities, depending on where the organizations decided to allocate resources this quarter, sometimes security is top of mind, sometimes it isn't.
Another thing that I liked about what Courtney just said is that, let's move on to specifically SPDX, right? There surely is overlap with some of the functionality that you guys already provided. But I do appreciate a lot the fact that you appreciated at that time that SPDX and other standards are out there to communicate the SBOMs, right? That's the whole point, right? In the case of the SPDX, it's an ISO, a freely available ISO standard that goes through all the process that ISO requires. And the whole goal is to communicate SBOM information, right? Formats and stuff like that. So I always get really philosophical when I try to describe it in high level, but it's like a taxonomy, an ontology, a set of a vocabulary, a set of words that we all agree mean this and that, right? And if we all agree on a vocabulary, we all know that green refers to a specific color, not blue, not orange. If we all had a vocabulary for software and packages and the relationship between them, then everything regarding supply chain, software supply chain, would be much easier. So that's the aim. That's where we're heading. And the fact that GitHub Incorporated and other huge projects and products like it helps us a lot, right? Because eventually we will get a lingua franca, the English of communication in real world between humans of software packages, right? The lingua franca of software packages. So that's the whole goal. So I guess my next question is, why did SPDX became the chosen, for now at least, the chosen one? And if you want to move on to why you made it self-service, which I'm really intrigued about. So those two questions.
Yeah, I'll start and Zach, you jump in as you like. So SPDX, we are just starting to dip our toe into our what our world of SBOM support is looking like. So SPDX is definitely a start. It was offsited in our user research of folks that were already using SBOMs. What type were they using? SPDX came up a lot, and specifically the use case that the problem that we were solving for our users with our first ship for SBOMs was mostly around the compliance piece, and specifically around license compliance. Yeah. And folks were mostly using, again, SPDX format SBOMs for the licenses. The package license data that we use within GitHub, within Dependency Graph, are SPDX licenses. So it marries well. And with the self-service, it does come down as an SPDX one. Zach is going to demo a CLI extension that we have that then you can pick if you want to do SPDX or CycloneDX. And ultimately, we want to be able to be providing our users with what they need at the right time. So we'll be looking into extensibilities there. But yeah, so popularity, really meeting that license compliance case was the decisions for starting with SPDX. And we can talk a little bit about like how we're kind of what our future for SBOMs look like in the different ways that we're like going beyond compliance. But before that, the self-service side of things is an interesting one, because before we got into that, like push a button, get an SBOM, we did have ways to use GitHub Actions to generate SBOMs. The CLI extension came out before that push button. But in a lot of the research that we were doing, GitHub is a developer platform, but there are folks that use GitHub, and obviously folks that work with developers that are not developers themselves. And specifically for that, like compliance use case on SBOMs, the folks that need them are not developers.
Correct.
They're on the legal team, they're product managers sometimes, and they don't want to have to go bug their developers to be able to generate these SBOMs using like CLI tools or GitHub Actions, these things that are a little bit more inaccessible to non-dev folks. So that was where really now anyone can come in here and generate this SBOM for this project. That's brilliant. And take it with you and then do whatever you need to with it.
Okay, nice. That's fantastic. Okay. Zach, do you want to jump into the sharing your screen and showing us the demo, or do you want to add anything to what Courtney just said?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to do the demo. So let me line this up here.
I have to add, while we wait. Oh, okay. Go on. I can see your screen perfectly well.
Oh, wonderful. Yes. So like Courtney said, if you are most comfortable on github.com, you can navigate to your project. And if it has the dependency graph enabled, then you can generate an SBOM from your repository in the web interface. But it depends. It really depends on the use case, right? Are we talking about developers? Are we talking about compliance officers? Or, who is going to be generating the SBOM? And so as a developer, my demo here is a little bit more
You don't want
focused.
to pretend you're a compliance manager,
well,
right?
So I might have this as part of my process of tagging a branch for release, or I might even inside of a GitHub action, I could call the GHCLI. But this is a demonstration of what it looks like from the sort of like command line point of view.
And to be honest, before you move on, like literally the self-service, let's say the version of this functionality that is self-served through a button, it literally is as simple as that. So there would be
not a compelling demo.
No demo. Honestly, go and try it. If you're listening to this and you're not a developer like me, go try it with any of the repos that your developers are working on, and it's just simple. It cannot get more simple. It's beyond easy to use. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, just asking for help, you can see it supports alternative formats. You can request that it include licensing information, which is the default for SPDX. And then you can also say if you want to run it in the existing repository, or if you want to point it at some other code base. And so here, a lot of our supply chain work is in the GitHub organization advanced security. And the repository for this extension is at github.com/advanced-security/GHSBOM. And so then what I'm going to do is run my SBOM command on itself to tell us about what dependencies it has. By default, of course, it's all smashed together. So I'm going to have it in a human readable form. And then just make it so I can easily scroll up and down here. And as simple as that, this is being generated on the server side. It's very quick. And then you can see that we have our preamble here, some information about the tool, of course, the data license, specification type information, and then just going through this particular code base is in Go. So you see a lot of the pearls here refer to Go dependencies, and then whatever information is available for each of those dependencies. And then, it's really simple as that.
Yeah. This format is JSON, YAML. What is it?
JSON. That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's brilliant. So yeah. As you said, anything else from the demo, or is it literally this?
No, I don't think so. I think that's it, really.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Yeah, no, it doesn't get more straightforward. So talking about the future, like Courtney said, I'd rather actually start with SPDX for one reason, because as Courtney said before, the traditional, and as you see there, one of the main focuses of SPDX has always been licensing. SPDX, just to be completely clear, is a open source project that is hosted in the Linux Foundation, and it provides mostly 4 assets: a spec, a model, which is the visual version of the spec, if you wish, low-level tooling, right, to help other vendors build on top of that, SPDX compliant tools or functionality, and eventually license IDs, the license ID list, right, which is one, again, it reverts back to the original days. But as just like GitHub listens to their user base and reacts in accordance to that, to the feedback, we have been doing so lately. So one of the things that we've realized in the past few years actually is that SPDX, the use cases that SPDX has been solving for have gone beyond licensing, to the point that it's been stretched out a bit, and we need to make it clear that that we can and we will provide functionality to support other use cases much better. That's why just a month and a half ago, we released the release candidate of SPDX 3.0, which has a new functionality, let's call it this way, new things in it that we call profiles, which is basically a superset of the whole spec, but fine-tuned towards specific use cases. So there's a licensing profile that was a really easy one, right? Almost or SPDX was tuned towards that use case. But then we've added other really important ones and really requested ones like security, the build profile, AI, data sets, and so forth. And we will keep adding more as long as the community keeps requesting more. So that, again, the usage of SPDX, which sometimes has been described as a bit overwhelming, because again, the spec is a huge thing. It's a vocabulary, it's a taxonomy. It can be a bit daunting. If you just want to use SPDX to solve for your specific supply chain transparency needs in the AI realm, let's say that you're building something with Gen AI, you need to verify the licenses of the data sets that you train your models and the dependencies of the software that runs your models, whatever. You will have this specific items of SPDX related to that use case in that profile, right? And same for the build profile and so on and so forth. So that's what actually is some of the new things of SPDX 3.0, and that's the way we're heading, right? We want to become a generalist SBOM communication standard, more so than SPDX already is, because that's the way in our limited in our limited world, and I'm comparing SPDX with GitHub. That's the way we think we can add value to the world, right? But I could see this charter being applied in GitHub, extending to many other areas. So would you tell us where software supply chain is heading at, and how is GitHub kind of supporting that now and in the future?
Zach, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I mean, it's hard to know where to start and where to end. There's a couple of frameworks out there that I have found particularly helpful, like SLSA, SLSA, and a few years ago they modeled as much of the development process as they could, and talked about at each step of the process, what are the threats that you might face from an attacker, and then what sort of mitigations you might have to address those threats. I believe back in April, they just released their 1.0 model and the recommendations.
Correct.
Initially, it was very comprehensive, and this 1.0 version has focused quite a bit on the build process. And I think there was a lot of wisdom to that because we were furthest along in defining and building these mitigations, the build step. And in a post-SolarWinds world, we couldn't have this conversation without mentioning SolarWinds at least once. The build is an area of focus at this moment in time. But it is only, it's the heart of it, but there's also the rest of it to either side of it. So I think increasingly we're going to hear people talking about ways to authenticate contributions to a code base. I think people are going to be interested in what policies were followed as code was developed. I think things like every contribution had a code review. Maybe in high compliance regimes, you require multiple reviewers. And then information too about how a system is being deployed and what sort of policy enforcement that you want to evaluate, before deploying something. That said, your dependencies are really at the heart of this. I don't think that we've solved all the problems yet in managing dependencies, open source or otherwise. And I think there's going to be a lot of continued interest in providing more fidelity, more information about licensing and versioning. And then also how some of our existing security programs that grew up before SPDX might use, SBOM formats.
Nice.
People have been doing vulnerability management for decades. Now we have this higher fidelity information about dependencies. And so how do we bring these things together and iterate and improve the existing capabilities that we have?
Brilliant. Okay. Anything else to add there, Courtney?
Specifically on the, so the push button is a source SBOM, and as Zach mentioned, dependency management isn't going anywhere even as we explore things into the build and whatnot. And with the push button self-service SBOM on the dependency graph today, it's at the head of the main branch, which solves like one part of the problem. But it really then puts the impetus on the user to be hitting that button at the right time if they're not using it as part of their own developer workflows and everything. And we want to solve the problem of, okay, so I have like all of these historical releases. I want to know what is I want SBOMs at those moments in time so that if there's a vulnerability, then I can go and I can see exactly where I am exposed and do historical auditing on SBOMs there. So SBOMs attached to releases on certain branches. Also looking at how do we serve folks that are using monorepos. An SBOM for a monorepo is not really doing the job, right? So extending the different ways that people can create SBOMs across the GitHub platform.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that's a brilliant idea to explore. So I'm hearing then that you're drawing inspiration from Salsa, that you're not neglecting, in fact, the opposite, expanding or exploring the possibility of becoming even more granular with dependency relevant information there, and also, I mean, we were talking before about awareness of SBOMs and maturity on the demand side, on the receiving end, on the market, but also us as providers in the case of SPDX of a format, a standard, and GitHub in the case of a security provider, right? We need to explore more things to adapt to the complex world out there and the classic world. Referring to the monorepos, there's nothing classic about it. I mean, in the sense that it's still valid. Has been overcome. It's a completely valid architecture. And yeah, sometimes we think that everything's covered, and we're not right. Software, that's the beauty of it. It's a really complex world, and there's so many edge cases and differences there that we always need to be evolving our own features and systems so that we adapt the best to what's needed. So we have mentioned all the buzzwords, the executive order. You didn't mention Cyber Resiliency Act because you're not Europeans, so therefore I excuse you. That's the executive order of here, Europe. In the UK, there's not much going on yet, but I'm sure a silly name will come up for some kind of regulation that is needed. Don't get me wrong, I actually welcome it, depending on how well. I won't go into any controversy. So I think in general they're good. We've mentioned, what was the other buzzword SolarWinds, okay. Any other thing? Did we miss anything that you wanted to chat about, specifically of GitHub, SPDX, or in general software supply chain? Anything that you missed? Okay, well then, with that, I think we covered all the ground. I'm really, really grateful that a powerhouse like GitHub is actually providing their users with SPDX, and again, not the only format that you can use certainly at GitHub. And I'm really glad that the vision that you guys put on the table for security is really aligned with what I think Salsa and others are the best frameworks and best practices that the whole community has come up with, even if it's just because many brains were put together to come up with those things, but also because it's open and evolving and being specified to specific use cases. And so it's a very live project and others. I think that you guys are going in the really, really good direction. So congrats on that too. And thank you for being with me.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care all. Bye-bye.